imbuing all of humanity with inherent dignity and infinite worth. And because we taught the world the value of a weekend, indeed the concept of rest at all. We taught the world of the Sabbath, and that part of that inherent dignity of Tzelem Elohim means that we should not be slaves to anything of this world, no man, no regime, not even time itself, and therefore we must have a Sabbath. We taught the world that some laws, such as do not murder and do not steal, need no qualification, because morality itself is written into the structure of the universe. Second, we are here tonight because, it may be that the Holocaust is a tremendum, as some scholars have put it, an anomalous, fearful mystery within Jewish history itself, unique encounter. But I don't think so. I think it's a natural part of human history, and we have to know that. We have to remember and know that it's a part of what humans can do in any generation. In tyrannical, dictatorial regimes, we've seen it in communist and socialist regimes, which ultimately tend toward dictatorships, and if not tempered, it can also happen in proper democracies. Third, we're here tonight because Jews are the master class in resilience. Everybody knows of the ship called the Exodus, thanks to Leon Uris and Paul Newman, where Uris wrote about the Aliyah Bet, which was the code name given to the illegal immigration to Israel by Jewish refugees from Nazi-controlled countries. The Exodus was, and that was its specific name, specifically the ship of survivors trying to get into Israel from the DP camps. But there was another ship. There was another ship called the Afal Pi Chen, which doesn't work as a name grammatically, but works as a symbol. Afal Pi Chen literally means nonetheless, or even though, or despite this. In other words, we Jews are here nonetheless, even though, despite all we've been through. We are the people that revived the nation. We revived a language. We fought Haman and Pharaoh for 3,000 years, and now we fight them with lasers, AI, F-15s, and even beepers. Because that's our people's ingenuity and brilliance and resilience that no other people have shown. That's why we're here. We're the people of the Maccabees, of Chana Senesh, and of the partisans. We're 15 million out of 7.5 billion, a mere fraction of the world. And it may not be politically correct to say, but we're not just like every other people. Our history proves we're different. Not necessarily better than anybody else, but we're special. We are. We're special. We have to remember it. And finally, fourth, we're here tonight to remember the individuals who had no one else to remember them. God has described the high holidays as Zocher HaNishkachot, as the one who remembers those forgotten. We're here to emulate God, to be godlike, by remembering those who are lost, those who are forgotten, those who have none but us to remember them. So in the end, we're here to remember what has happened, the individuals who endured it, all we've been through, all we share and carry. And ultimately, we're here to remember what we cherish and what's worth protecting. I thank you all so much for being here tonight.
is the Survivors' Declaration. The age of the Holocaust survivors is drawing to a close. Before long, no one will be left to say, I was there, I saw it, I remember what happened. All that will be left will be the books of research, pictures, literature, films, and archives of testimonies. This will be a new era. The dark memory of the Shoah that lies in the hearts and souls of the survivors will become a call to remember to choose love over hate, compassion over indifference, tolerance over judgment, and hope over despair. I invite Paul Schwarzbart and Rina Victor to join me at the podium to light 6 candles in the memory of the 6 million Jews murdered in the Shoah.
We gather. How does one hold space for 6 million lives? How does one remember a generation lost to the ashes? What does it look like to keep marching on when the piles of our loved ones' shoes come back in flashes? We enter into this space to give life to their stories, to remember there was a life before the war. There were holidays, weddings, music, love, loss, and so much more. Home-cooked Passover meals in the hills of Austria, horas danced in the Polish shtetls, babies' burses on Nordic isles, Russian yentas ready to meddle. Let us take the time to feel all that was lost, lament. Let us cry, let us mourn, let us know what it is like to not deny. Not deny our pain, not deny our past, not deny history comes back, not deny our freedom might not last. History continues to repeat itself. Evil has no clear end. What is our role? What pieces are we able to start to mend? Can we confront evil, look it straight in the eye, stare at it long and hard, deciding if it is our job to heed the outcry? We can honor those who stood up, those who were unable to look away, those who knew they could face death and still acted as an attaché. The families who took children as their own, the families who hid the farmers who hid families underground, the towns that smuggled their Jewish brothers out on boats, there was so much bravery hidden in darkness all around. We reflect on all of this as we ask what it means to be a righteous Jewish person today, or any person. We ask ourselves what it is to be a Jew when so many did not get away. We gather to hold hands in song, in joy, in tears, in praise, feeling the sweet warmth of togetherness, knowing the impact of one individual, one community can amaze. Let us enter into this ceremony, our hearts open wide. No, we were not there. We were all the ones who survived.
Our gathering honors the dignity of the lives of Jews before the war. We choose not to focus solely on the destruction that followed, but to appreciate and celebrate the dignity, beauty, complexity, and creativity of their lives. The lives we remember span countries and continents, vocations and social class, and a range of religious and secular identities. We remember with music, photos, and poetry. I'd like to welcome Shira Fox Steinberg. Shira will introduce the song.
Good evening, everyone. I want to share a song that's very close to my heart that comes from a world that once was, a world of bustling streets, of laughter and struggle, of music that carried both sorrow and resilience. The song is called Papyrossen, which means cigarettes in Yiddish. Written by Herman Yablokov, sung and known across continents, Papyrossen became one of the most beloved and widely recognized Yiddish songs of its time. I'm going to go off my script. My father was a Yiddish performer, and he always jokes that he's been a cantor for 50, 60 years, but really he's an unemployed Yiddish actor. And I called him when I was practicing this song because I found so many recordings online. I said, which one should I choose? And he said, gosh, when I was a child, he was born at the very tail end of the war, right before the liberation in early May of 1945. He said, when I was a child, this song was so popular, it was just sung everywhere all the time by everyone. Yiddish, the language of this song, was once the heartbeat of millions of Jews across Europe. It held within it humor and poetry, longing and wisdom. Songs like Papyrossen were not just entertainment, but expressions of the Jewish people's soul, capturing the textures of daily life and the emotional truths that bound communities together. At its surface, Papyrossen tells the simple story of a young boy standing out on the street in the cold, selling cigarettes to passerbys. But beneath that simplicity lies something much deeper, a window into everyday life in Eastern Europe before the Holocaust. A life marked, yes, by hardship, but also by dignity, humanity, and Am Yisrael Chai, the enduring Jewish spirit. When we sing this song today, we are not only remembering loss, we are honoring life, giving voice again to a culture that the Holocaust tried to erase, but could not. In its melody and its words, Papyrosin carries the echoes of those who sang before us, invites us to listen, to remember, and to keep their stories alive. I am so honored to sing this song tonight and to be joined by my friends Michael Rennie and Maya Silverman on violin and piano. A kalte Nacht, ein nebelige Finsterrum mit ihm, steht ein Engel, vertreuert und kickt sich an ihm. Fin Regen schützt den Nordwand, a Koschekol, Alter in Hand, in seinem Augen weiden jeden Stimm. Ich hab schon nicht kann Koyach, mehr ihm zu gehen in Gas. Hingeregt und habt gerissen, finde dem Regen an Nass. Ich schlepp ihm sich von Beginn, keiner geht nicht zu verdienen. Alle lachen, machen, find mir Spaß. Kupitsche, Käufche, Papyrosen, Tricken, in Regen, nicht vergossen. Und es ist mein Schreien und meine Läufen, keiner will bei mir nicht kaufen, wo ich gehen will, ich muss ihn wie hielt. Kupitsche, Käufche, Schwebelach, eine Tikin, der mitwetier, Yosamo, der Quikin. Und es ist mein Schreien und meine Läufen, keiner will bei mir nicht kaufen, wo ich gehen will, ich muss ihn wie hielt. Kupitsche, Käufche, Papyrosen, Tricken, in Regen, nicht vergossen. Käufche, billig, Benemones, Käuft und Holz auf mir, Rachmones, Ratevit, von hier mich erzählt. Kupitsche, Käufche, Papyrosen, Tricken, in Regen, nicht vergossen. Und siehst mein Schreien und meine Läufe, keiner will bei mir nicht kaufen, wo ist gehen will.
We enter, we remember, we lament. In a little more than a month, my sister and my brother and I will travel to what's now Wrocław, Poland, but was Breslau, Germany, where my grandmother was born and from where she fled at the age of 14 in 1936, where the Jewish Theological Seminary stood, a center of Jewish life. And then we'll go to Leipzig, Germany, where my father's father, his name is Leo Fuchs, where he was thrown into the river by the Leipzig Zoo by the Nazis and spit upon and taken to Dachau. And he was able to leave because it was early enough that his brothers across the ocean were able to get him out. I don't know if when I'm there I will weep, but I imagine if I do weep, it will be for those who were not able to get out. I imagine that I'll consider what life might have been like if my grandparents had been able to live in peace, even as I realize I probably wouldn't be here. I imagine that if I weep, it will be in part out of lament that we as a species have not yet learned the lessons of our history. Even if I have no words, and you have few, our reach falling short and our language stammering, we awaken the memory of an ocean of indescribable torments, humankind's most enormous slaughter. With the very muteness of our lips and with a sadness that transcends language, for these things I weep. For the parents who were murdered, for the brothers, the sisters, for the children who dreamed, for these things I weep. For the house that was destroyed, for the neighbors who betrayed, for the street from which they were driven, for the synagogues that were shattered, for the whole nation whose life was crushed. For these things I weep. For each person, their world and their mystery, for their loves, their despairs, and their dreams, for their study, their deeds, and their pains, for their memories, their anger, and their laughter, for each person and their life.
For these things we weep, for 6 million lives cut short, for the generations of their children and would-be grandchildren and would-be great-grandchildren who would have brought so much creativity and strength and insight and wisdom to enrich our Jewish world. For these things and so much more, we weep. The Shalom Hartman Hitkansut, this Seder, invites us, each one of us, to add our own voices to the act of honoring, remembering, and lament, and so much more. Anita and Paul and Rena, thank you. You are pillars of our community and always and forever will be. And we are here to stand on your shoulders
and bring your stories forward today and always. For those of us who are 1 or 2 or 3 generations removed, our voices matter too. Now more than ever, we must share our experience of Holocaust memory, of family trauma, of what it means to live in a Jewish body in a world still aflame with Jew hatred today. Let all of our lives be containers for holy stories, the holy stories of the 6 million murdered and all who survived. Each life, an entire world. In this spirit, and Rabbi Leo, I'm so glad you shared about your family history. Let me add another generational voice to the tapestry of Jewish life and survival and storytelling. Growing up, my own life was surrounded and infused by stories and memories of the Holocaust, as so many of yours were. I thought about the tattooed numbers by day, and I dreamed of the children in hiding every night. The stories were so much a part of me. We traveled everywhere together. They were inseparable from my very being and my becoming. And so long before I was a rabbi, I became a history teacher because I considered the construction and preservation of memory to be among the most sacred tasks we can engage with. I became a Holocaust educator, guiding teens through the cobblestones of Krakow and the concrete of Warsaw, taking them to the Umschlagplatz, showing them where the wall of the ghetto stood, praying Shacharit in the synagogue in Auschwitz, walking alongside them through Auschwitz-Birkenau. Everywhere we went, we brought stories of the dead back to life. The evening before taking the teens to Auschwitz-Birkenau, I couldn't sleep. I sat with piles and piles and piles full of stories. That was before cell phones and all that jazz. Testimonies from the murdered and testimonies from those who survived. How could I possibly choose which stories to share and which to leave out? No story was more important than any other then, nor is it now. In each life, in every word, an entire world, a parallel version of a perverse Mendelian test, which stories to share, which to remember, which will be forgotten. I trembled as I read the stories all night long, as I did again last night before this Yom Hashoah commemoration. It felt like the holiest task of my life to share the history and the stories of the Holocaust with the next generation. This was both profoundly true and somehow simultaneously grotesque, that we would travel together just 60 years later at the time, in our jeans and our t-shirts, in the sunshine of summer, to the site of our people's genocide, to learn, to know, to remember. I prayed that night, as I do each Yom Hashoah, Ribono Shel Olam, God, make me an instrument, a holy vessel for bringing these stories into the world, for sharing them with others so that they are not lost to history. God, give us, all of us, the strength and the courage to share the words that need to be told. Those of you who have been there before know there is a pond just before the remains of Crematoria 4. They say of this pond that it is still filled with the ashes and bone fragments of human beings that were dumped there after incineration. A few of the kids touched the sand by the pond with total horror, but they wanted to get close. They wanted to connect to the people who had been killed there. For some of them, their own grandparents, They wanted to understand. They wanted to be transformed into a person who could bring forward Jewish stories from our darkest moment and help those stories to find the light and to live. And there by that pond, I read Charlotte Delbo's words, extermination. 5 by 5, they walked down the street of arrivals. It is the street of departures, but they don't know. It is a one-way street. They proceed in orderly fashion so as not to be faulted for anything. They reach a building and heave a sigh. They have reached their destination at last. And when the soldiers bark their orders, shouting for the women to strip, they undress the children first, cautiously not to wake them all at once. After days and nights of travel, the little ones are edgy and cranky. And then the women undress in front of the children, nothing to be done. And when each is handed a towel, they worry whether the shower will be warm because the children could catch colds. And when the men enter the shower room, through another door, naked too, the women hide the children against their bodies. And perhaps at that moment, they all understand. And all day, and all night, every day, every night, the chimneys smoke, fed by this fuel from all parts of Europe. We stood there, surrounded by the stories and the ghosts and the ashes and the bone fragments of the dead. And we prayed El Malei Rachamim, as we will do in just a moment. We prayed for the 6 million, the 1 million who died there at Auschwitz-Birkenau, and those who died in concentration camps and death camps throughout Europe, those who died of starvation in the ghetto or died in resistance defending the ghetto walls, those who died in the forests, those who died in mass graves, and those who died on death marches. They were people from all different walks of life and language and background and levels of religious observance, and believers and atheists, united in death through the final solution for the thing they shared in common. They were Jewish. We who survive, thrive, and endure today, unite today, remembering that we are one Jewish community. We make up 0.2% of the global population. We are all Holocaust educators. We are all of us holy vessels for stories that cry out to be shared and remembered. We need to support one another and not tear one another down for our differences, real or perceived, that we may have. We are one Jewish community. And tonight, on this Yom Hashoah, we remember, we honor, and we lament the 6 million, our ancestors, our family members for some of us, who perished in the Holocaust. And so we take a moment of silence before rising for El Malei Rachamim. invite you to rise. El male rachamim, shochein b'maromi, hametzei menucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashchina. Bemalot kedoshim uteorim kezohar harakia mazhirim et nishmat 6 million acheinu ve'achioteinu shenerhegu al kiddush Hashem bal harachamim yastirim beseitek enafav leolamim veitzra chaim enishmatam Adonai hu nachalatam ve'anuchu b'shalom amishkavam v'nomar Amen. Fully compassionate God on high, to our 6 million brothers and sisters and siblings murdered because they were Jews, grant clear and complete rest for them in the lofty heights of your sacred and pure wings, whose brightness shines like the fairy glow of heaven. O source of mercy, enfold them in your embrace, secure their souls in eternity. Adonai, welcome them with love. May they rest in peace. Amen.
Amen. We remain standing. Yitgadal, Auschwitz, Yitgadash, Lodz, Shmei Rabbah, Ponar, V'alma Divrach Chirutei, Babayar,
V'amlich Mochevtei, Maidanek, B'chayechon u'v'yomechon, Birkenau, V'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael, Kovno, B'agala u'vizman Kariv, Janoska, V'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Le'elam Omei Amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach Theresienstadt. V'yitpa'ar v'yitramam Buchenwald. V'yitnaseh v'yitadar Treblinka. V'yitdaleh v'yitalal Vilna. Shemei Dekudesha Brichu Bergen-Belsen. Le'ela Mauthausen.
Min kol birchata v'shirata, Dachau, Tushbechata v'nechemata, Minsk, Da'amiran v'alma, Warsaw, v'imru,
Amen.
Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu v'al Kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. Oseh Shalom b'mromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu v'al Kol Yisrael, v'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel, v'imru, Amen. Please be seated.
We confront. In this moment, we do not turn away. We confront the reality of the Shoah and the human capacity to commit evil. We allow ourselves to face what was done and to remember those whose lives and communities were destroyed. As we reflect, we also recognize the responsibility this places upon us to choose dignity over dehumanization, compassion over indifference, and to stand against hatred in all its forms.
What's the point of remembering? Having just concluded Passover, we transition to Yom Hashoah primed and ready. The message of Passover, linked as it is with Shavuot and entering the covenant at Har Sinai, is undeniable. I must first identify with my people's suffering and struggle for freedom before I can embrace the covenant. Jewish texts and thinkers teach us emphatically that remembering is not a passive mental activity, but a call to action, a moral and religious imperative to protect the stranger, remain vigilant against cruelty, and stand up for the vulnerable. But how do we embed these aspirations into hearts, minds, and hands ready to enact them? As an educator, an educational leader, this question drives me daily. As educators, as community members, and even as parents, we regularly feel the tension between wanting to protect children from the evils of the world and needing to build their capacity to confront hard realities morally, courageously, and effectively. We're forced to ask ourselves difficult questions, such as, when do we start teaching the Diary of Anne Frank? What details do we include in our Yom HaShoah observances? How do we discuss attacks on Jewish communities in Sydney, Toronto, Detroit, or the horrors of October 7th? How do we answer students' questions about police shootings, ICE raids, and anti-Semitic violence that appear in the headlines almost daily? For educators, as for parents, where you start to answer these questions makes all the difference in cultivating moral courage. You see, moral courage is not only about fighting against something. It actually comes from an internal grounding in identity, values, and a sense of belonging. If we do not cultivate a child's sense of self and their connection to a community larger than themselves, then their fight can lose steam. It can lack purpose or become susceptible to the loudest voices of social media influencers. This multi-dimensional work takes years to cultivate, and I want to share 4 concrete strategies for cultivating moral courage drawn from the field of Jewish education. Number 1, building resilience. The first step is building resilience, specifically through the power of stories. Research by Professor Marshall Duke at Emory University has shown that the one thing that all resilient people share, regardless of their background, is that they know the stories of their families and their people. Turns out when kids grow up hearing the stories of struggle and failure, of going through hard times and coming out the other side, when they hear those stories from their elders, that builds their resilience. When young people hear these stories from people who have gone through them, it develops their own inner compass to navigate hard things. When children learn family or peoplehood stories, it creates a shared history, strengthens emotional bonds, and helps them make sense of their experience when something senseless happens. After all, when we don't know what to do, we look for stories about how people have coped in the past. Yeah, we often joke, they tried to kill us, we survived, let's eat. But the truth behind that is vital. Young people must see themselves as part of the unfolding Jewish story, from the slavery in Egypt to the horrors of the Shoah to the return to Israel. This historical perspective teaches them that they belong to a resilient people who survive and thrive. This resilience is the ground floor of moral courage. It is what allows a child to confront a bully or stand up to injustice. Number 2, active school, active learning. In schools, the pedagogical framework of active learning is often referred to as project-based learning, but in a Jewish day school, project-based learning can be described more like memory and action, moving students beyond being spectators of history to becoming active participants in writing the next chapter of the Jewish people. You may have heard that Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel once said that the world needs more text people, more than it needs textbooks. Memory and action shifts the focus from passive acquisition of knowledge to active meaning-making. Students don't just read about the past, they use it to solve modern real-world problems. And when children have some agency in deciding what they learn and what they want to work on, their level of investment goes up, the level of rigor goes up, and the learning goes deeper. Project-based learning gets students to identify a problem that they care about, roll up their sleeves and work to come up with a solution, overcome problems, persevere in the face of challenges. Students work in groups, and that teaches them how to collaborate and see things from multiple perspectives and wrestle with complex questions. Memory in action embodies the principle from Pirkei Avot that it is not study that is the essential thing, but action. Students are asked to connect their passions with Jewish values so that their projects become a rehearsal for a life of ethical action, and they begin to ask themselves critical questions. Just because I can do it, ought I? And what are the consequences of my actions on others? Jewishly grounded project-based learning is a training ground where students develop the tools for repairing and reimagining the world. Number 3, grappling with complexity. Our world is plagued by complex problems with no easy answers, and we must build children's ability to sit with that complexity. This is the move beyond the comfort of good versus evil into the difficult space where values collide. And this can begin as early as kindergarten with simple perspective taking, asking, how does my friend's heart feel? By the time they reach 5th grade, they can be taught how to lean into discomfort. In an age of easy answers, students can practice the truly courageous act of staying in conversation with someone you disagree with without shutting down. As students get into middle school, they can learn the difference between an upstander and a bystander. Grappling with complexity means realizing that silence, too, is an action. In some schools, we select curriculum using windows and mirrors as a framework. When a curriculum offers windows onto the experiences of people who are unfamiliar to us, it engenders empathy as we seek to find ways to see others on their own terms. In Jewish terms, it helps us fulfill the mandate to love the stranger. When a curriculum offers a mirror onto the experiences of oneself, students see themselves in the larger picture of the world. This helps them ground their identity and their values in something larger than themselves. It is in these foundational years that students build the habit and mind and heart to sit with complexity and discomfort and find the strength to do what is right, even when it's hard or unpopular. And number 4, restorative practices. Everyone makes mistakes. The Jewish tradition teaches us that we have the capacity to mend our ways and repair harms done. Tshuva is always possible, but listening to someone tell you how deeply you hurt them is hard. Learning to apologize is also hard. Taking steps to change or make amends is perhaps the hardest of all. Like so many other aspects of moral courage, we are not born with the skills to do tshuva. When kids are forming their identity and asking who they are and who they want to be, they're also learning how to live in community with one another, and they're bound to hurt each other. Among the most important things we can teach kids is how to repair the harms they cause. And so we can teach them how to have hard conversations, how to acknowledge wrongdoing, how to speak up, how to call someone out, and how to say, "You hurt me," or "That's wrong." Yeah, we all remember detention, all the school consequences, but how many of us remember going through a restorative process where two people who have been in conflict of some sort must speak their truth and then find a way to repair? It's hard to stand face to face and courageously acknowledge harm, pledging to fix it, making agreements so that the harm is not repeated, and then giving someone room to change once they have made a sincere apology. This is one of the most important and hardest things that we can teach kids how to do. Nobody likes having hard conversations, and the pathway to moral courage is not easy. But those hard conversations tend to be some of the most transformative conversations. The Torah tells us, "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," love your neighbor as yourself, but let us not forget that right before telling us to do that, it tells us, "Hocheach tochiach et amitecha," rebuke your fellow when they have done wrong. Sometimes you have to rebuke somebody. Sometimes you have to stand up and speak out and shine a light on wrongdoing. And that is hard. But it can be learned. And I would suggest it is our moral imperative to teach our children well.
Please join us in singing Eli Eli. You will find the words in your programs.
I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart. The sand, the sea, the rush of the water, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart. Eli, Eli, Shelo yigamer olam, achor ve'hayam, rishru shel hamayim, berak hashamayim, tfilat ha'adam. Achor hayam, rishru shel hamayim, berak hashamayim, tfilat ha'adam.
We are up here today to introduce and honor Reina Victor, a child survivor of the Holocaust whose mother's courage saved her life. In doing so, we also wanted to share a part of our own family's story of surviving the Holocaust.
This Passover reminded us that sharing the story of our Jewish people is not only a tradition, but vital to the survival of our people. Just like we retell our story on Passover, Hanukkah, and really any other chance us Jews can get, we also must share the courageous and horrendous stories of the Holocaust.
We are the descendants of 3 Holocaust survivors. Our great-grandparents, Anne, a force to be reckoned with, her husband Shlomo Slovik, and their daughter, our grandmother, Marcia. Marcia was born on Kristallnacht in Warsaw, Poland in 1938. When the war escalated and things became too dangerous for them to stay, Anne, Shlomo, and baby Marcia fled Poland. They ended up in a Siberian work camp in Russia for most of the war. And their stories of their time fleeing Europe and in Siberia have impacted our lives today tremendously.
We heard about how on the way to Russia, they were denied passage on a ship. And so when the guard was distracted, Anne stole the guard's gun and demanded passage on the next one. We heard about Anne selling her own watch for a whole cow so that she could provide milk for her family and the others staying with them. And we heard about how Marcia, with her red hair and green eyes, answered the door of a Russian family's home that she was staying with. Directly to the German soldiers who knocked on the door, she was able to say multiple Hail Marys and was able to steer them away.
The truth of these stories seems stranger than fiction, and yet through them, our great-grandmother Anne and Marcia showed us how to have gumption, be strong women, and stand up for not only ourselves, but for the people around us. They truly stopped at nothing to protect our family and their chance at a better, safer life. A true babalusta. Unlike our mom, Noe and I did not get the privilege of growing up down the street from them, but our mom made sure to pass on their stories, values, and memories. Being descendants of Holocaust survivors mean we carry this massive event in history with us every single day. And while it's not our job to speak for all Jews, it is incredibly important for us to share our family's story whenever possible, to friends, family, and anyone else who might be curious. It's a source of great pride, and we feel so fortunate to be raised by incredible, persevering, brave, and ambitious women. Sharing stories of the Holocaust and what our family sacrificed to survive is the true meaning of Lador Vador.
We share because we are proud. We share to keep our family with us. We share to celebrate the lives that were lost. We share to celebrate the sacrifices our family made. We share because it can make an impact on others, and we share because we hope it might inspire others to act against injustice. We share because silence is not the answer. Here to share her own story, please give a warm welcome to Raina and her daughter.
Oh my goodness. Don't worry about it. Should I wait though? No. Okay, from here. Right.
I honor the memory of my mother today and every day. She survived the war and the Holocaust and 6 years of post-war reconstruction in Hamburg, Germany. She and my 2 sisters and I were in hiding in northern Germany on a farm outside of Hamburg for 2 years, from 1943 to 1945. My mother lost more than 50 family members in the Holocaust. She had to watch as her own mother and younger brother were taken by the Nazis and sent on a transport to Minsk, where they were killed. Her father committed suicide before the war began. After the war ended, my mother listened to the names of survivors that were read on the radio. She soon realized of her entire immediate and extended family Only she and one cousin survived. She did not speak of any of this until 40 years after the war ended. For those 2 years in hiding, we had no water, no heat, no electricity. My mother and the elderly man who lived on the farm helped make beds for us. She sewed sheets together and pillows, which she stuffed with hay. A neighbor gave the owner of the farm several cloth diapers, which my mother dyed with tea and made into curtains. I remember we had to sleep in our clothes and shoes, and always someone had to be on a lookout for the Gestapo. The friends never told the neighbors that my mother was hidden there, only that they were taking care of 3 children of a German soldier. My father was not Jewish and was drafted into the German army. I'm not sure how we got food. We ate some fruit growing on the farm. My mother let us each plant one thing. One sister planted flowers, one sister planted beans, and I planted strawberries. I share these details because they illustrate my mother's efforts to make our circumstances as normal or even as pleasant as possible. That is what she did. Prior to our going into hiding in 1943, my mother was summoned by the Gestapo to come to the Hamburg Rathaus City Hall. She was told by the SS officer that they had a letter from my father that he wanted to divorce her because he did not want to be married to a Jew. My mother knew they were lying and said, "I have to see that letter for myself." The SS officer claimed that he didn't have it, but he would get it. In the meantime, she would have to stay at City Hall and clean all the floors. Every time she was summoned, she brought me and my sisters with her, this time as well. So she responded she couldn't clean the floors because she had an injury, because she had her children to watch. The officer said something like they would watch the children, which of course was frightening. My mother then took out her right hand out of her pocket, a hand on which she only had these 2 fingers because 3 had been lost in an accident when she was 3 years old. Essentially, she shoved the hand into the Nazi officer's face, saying she couldn't clean the floors because of this injury. The officer may have been shocked, or maybe he felt sympathetic, but he let her go. Ultimately, the horribly injured hand, the hand that children would refuse to hold when she was a child, saved her. My mother was an incredibly resilient and brave woman. Here are 2 stories that illustrate that. One day after the war ended, we had returned to Hamburg. She was driving through the rubble-lined streets and was stopped by a police officer who asked for her license. She replied, "I don't have one. At the start of the war, the Nazis took my license from me. Now I'm waiting for them to give it back." He let her go. She refused to wait in lines. Once at a post office, she went to the front of the line. When people complained, she said, "At the start of the war, you didn't allow me as a Jew to stand in line with you. Now I refuse to stand in line with you." It was something she unfortunately continued to do here. She lived for 45 years here, the last 20 of which as a sole survivor of her family after the one cousin died. She always worked. She worked until she couldn't anymore, and then she got up and kept working, whether at her job or in the house where she cleaned, cooked, and took care of my children when I went to work. She always dressed beautifully. She flirted with my son-in-law and his brothers and lived to meet her first great-granddaughter, Davida, who was sitting there, and a desire to find joy in life. Oh, despite the darkness and the sorrow she held, she retained a sense of humor and desire to find joy in life and family.
After 40 years of silence, my grandmother was willing to tell her story. She spoke to many, many middle, high school, and college students, first to my high school classes when I became a German teacher, then later to the classes of my college students when I became an education professor. How hard this was for her is reflected in this story. I once brought her to present to an 8th grade English class reading the diary of Anne Frank. As she began, she seemed to lose her composure and hesitate, which was uncharacteristic of her. I took her out into the hall and asked her what was wrong. Through some hellback tears, she said, "I didn't know they would be so young. Why should they hear this?" Sorry. In the last years of her life, she was beginning to struggle from cognitive decline and spoke only German. My mother bought her a journal to write her thoughts down, hoping it would help. One of the few things she wrote was what the birth of my daughter, her great-granddaughter, meant to her.
Yes.
She wrote, "I am thinking a lot of the family. There is the lovely Davida, 10 days old, and the great-grandmother, 81 years old. That's really something. We are having a large family now, and I am still here."
Well, it's an honor to follow such stories, and it's an honor to be in the presence of survivors. We've selected a Hebrew song to share with you tonight, and I'd like to start by reading you the translation, a rough translation of the song. The song is called Rikma Enoshit Achat, or One Human Tapestry, and the words and the music were written by a gentleman by the name of Moti Hamel, and I was surprised to see that he actually wrote this in 1959. The song goes like this: "When I die, something of me will die in you, will die in you. When you die, something of you in me, something of you in me, will die with you, will die with you. For we all are, yes, we all are, we all interweave into one living human tapestry. And if one of us departs from us, something dies in us and something stays with them. If we knew how to calm down the hostility, if we only knew. If we knew how to quell our anger and rage, if we knew how to quell, despite our hurt feelings, express regret, if we knew how to quell and start anew. For we all are, yes, we all are. We all interweave into one living human tapestry." And on a personal note, yesterday, when we were rehearsing the song, in the middle of our rehearsal yesterday morning, I got the message that one of my friends died. And it was an interesting illustration by the universe of basically the meaning of the song. And I appreciate the universe for giving me a chance to learn how this grief thing really works. But thank you. No more demonstrations needed. My friend's name was Avri.
כשאמות משהו ממני, משהו ממני ימות בך,
ימות בך,
ימות בך, כשתמות, משהו ממך בי, משהו ממך בי ימות איתך,
ימות איתך,
ימות איתך, כי כולנו, כן כולנו,
כולנו רקמה אנושית אחת חיה,
ואם אחד מאיתנו
כן
הולך מעמנו,
משהו מת בנו, ומשהו נשאר איתו.
אם נדע
איך
להרגיע את האיבה,
אם רק נדע להשקיע,
את זעמנו,
אם נדע להשקיע,
על אף עלבוננו לומר סליחה,
אם נדע להשקיע
מההתחלה, כי כולנו, כן כולנו, כולנו רקמה אנושית אחת חיה,
ואם אחד מאיתנו
הולך מעמנו, משהו מת בנו,
ומשהו נשאר איתו. כי כולנו,
כולנו רקמה אנושית אחת חיה, ואם אחד מאיתנו הולך מעמנו, משהו מת בנו,
ומשהו
נשאר איתו.
After we have mourned the destruction and the loss, after we have told of the evil and standing in opposition to it, let us now ask, what can we learn here and now about how to remember responsibly? Just as we are responsible for the memory of those lost and those who suffered during the Shoah, we are responsible for our actions today. For decades, our family has been committed to embodying the lessons about Jewish resistance and resilience. One challenge we've always had is keeping the youth engaged. I'm particularly proud that Sonia and Isaac's granddaughter has chosen to live the lessons that her grandparents and great-grandparents embodied during the Shoah as resistance fighters. More than 25 years ago, Sonia and I were among the founders of the Jewish Partisan Educational Foundation, which provides educational curricula about the Jewish partisans and their life lessons to tens of thousands of K through 12 teachers around the world. The lessons we try to impart are You must speak out early and stand up to anti-Semitism and all forms of hate. That young people can make a meaningful difference, and to learn to be resilient, to never give up. So now I'd like to welcome our fourth generation activist, my daughter, Eva Orbach, to the Bima.
Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for such a beautiful evening. My name is Eva, and I am the proud granddaughter of Sonia Orbach, a beloved member of this Kol Shofar and Marin community. In 2007, almost 20 years ago, as a high school senior, I had the privilege of speaking about the legacy of the Holocaust from the perspective of my generation. It feels like a lifetime ago. My grandmother was still with us then, and we miss her. Returning to these words now, my original speech, I'm struck by how much of it still feels true and how much more urgent it feels today. Tonight, I want to reflect on the legacy of resistance that my grandmother embodied and on our responsibility to act against injustice, not only when it affects us, but wherever it exists, as the poem The Call expresses. I'll read it now. The Call by Israeli poet Michal Govrin, translated by Rachel Jacoby Rosenfield. The memory of yesterday is the call of today. I remember that I was exiled and will defend my home, my people, my kin. I will open my door to the stranger, the refugee, the displaced. For my people were the strangers and pursued. The memory of yesterday is the call of today. For I was the starving one and scavenged for bread. I was the naked one and sought a human face. My people were round up and slaughtered. And the world was silent then. The pain of yesterday is the call of today. I remember and will share my wealth and well-being with those distant and near. The poor of my town and the foreigner, in days of peace and in tempestuous times. The horrors of yesterday obligate me today. I will guard against evil and its many seductions. I will not let slogans lead me astray, igniting hatred, erasing humanity. The wounds of history warn us today, and when war erupts and again strikes the world, I will not stand idly by. I will not watch from a distance. I will remember that the only actual border runs through the human heart. And the voice that cries out from one people to another, the voice that cries out, calls to me. The memory of the Shoah is a call. There are many powerful lines in this poem, but the one that speaks most to me is, I will share my wealth and well-being with those distant and near. To me, this is the invitation of memory, not just to remember suffering, but to transform it into care, into justice and action. The poem asks us not to remain trapped in cycles of trauma, but to use what has happened to us as a catalyst, to protect the vulnerable, resist injustice, and to live our values through action. Growing up, my grandmother was a constant presence in my life. Every week, I went to her house for Shabbat dinner, and almost every week, a new story would emerge, sometimes sweet, sometimes painful, poured out from the deep well of her memory. She told me about her childhood in a small Polish shtetl, surrounded by a large and loving family and a tight-knit Jewish community. And then how quickly everything changed. The Soviet occupation in 1939, the German invasion in 1941, the ghetto, and then in 1942, her escape into the forest with her parents and uncle. One story that has always stayed with me comes from that winter in the forest,
They were cold, starving, and in constant danger. Then, unexpectedly, a Ukrainian peasant named Tikhon found them. Seeing my grandmother just 16 years old, he began to cry and said, "You older people have lived already, but this child hasn't had the chance to live yet." Tikhon was poor and had his own family to feed, and yet he still chose to help. He brought them food. He shared what little he had. He kept them informed of danger, and ultimately he helped my grandmother and her family connect to the Soviet partisans. Every time I hear this story, I'm struck by the courage that took to act with humanity in the face of danger and fear. It reminds me that even in the darkest times, there are those who do choose compassion. As I grew older, I learned more about my grandmother's life with the partisans, part of a broader movement of Jewish resistance fighters across Europe. She helped care for wounded soldiers, guarded the camp, and participated in acts of sabotage against Nazis. She didn't see herself as a hero. She was trying to survive. But her actions were a form of resistance, not only against physical destruction, but against being reduced to a victim. She once said, "If I was going to get killed, I was going to get killed as a fighter, not because I am a Jew." That has always stayed with me. It speaks to dignity, to agency, to refusing to be defined by those who seek to harm you. As Jews, we are commanded to remember. We retell the story of Passover each year, placing ourselves in the experience of liberation. We must do the same with the Shoah, not only preserving the facts, but carrying forward the stories, the humanity, and the lessons. We are now living in a time when soon there will be no more survivors left to tell these stories firsthand. So as we know, that responsibility is passing on. And the question becomes, what will we do with it? For me, the answer is not only remembrance, but action. We live in a world where suffering is everywhere. And one of the deepest lessons I carry is this: suffering cannot be compared. It can only be shared. A mother losing her child in one part of the world is not different in her grief from a mother anywhere else. Our history gives us a particular sensitivity to injustice. It gives us what I think of as a moral lens, a way of recognizing suffering and a responsibility to respond to it. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And as Abraham Joshua Heschel taught, the opposite of good is not evil. The opposite of good is indifference. During the Holocaust, much of the world stood by. The legacy of resistance asks us to do something different now. It asks us not to be bystanders, not to look away, and not to wait. It asks us to act early, courageously, and with compassion. When I think about my grandmother, I think about survival, about resistance, and I also think about what came after, how she built a life, a family, and a community, how she told her stories and how she lived. And I think about what it means for us today to carry that forward. That's why I now choose to get engaged in things like immigrant accompaniment work with my synagogue in Berkeley, being active in a group called Bay Area Jews for Justice, fundraising to support grassroots organizations doing critical work around the Bay Area, peace work in Israel and Palestine, get out the vote work, and cultural organizing like putting on my upcoming Kol retreat for Jewish music across the diaspora. You're all invited. It's why I also choose to name my 1-year-old daughter after my grandmother, so that I can not forget as I look at her every day. We cannot change what happened, but we can decide what it means. We can choose to let memory harden us or to let it deepen our humanity. We can choose fear or we can choose responsibility. We can choose indifference or we can choose loving action. The memory of the Shoah is not only a burden, it is a call to remember, a call to resist injustice, to stand with others, and to act. Thank you so much.
It has become our tradition to light a seventh candle. We have the 6 memorial candles, and we have a seventh candle of hope. And this year, Chloe Dick, who is the 4th generation of a Holocaust survivor, and her mom, Estelle, and her grandma, Maud, will light this one. We'll light our candle of hope. And we invite the Brandeis Choir. Come on up. this one's not working anymore. No, okay, I'll just say, I think I'm speaking on behalf of all of us when I say to you, Brandeis Choir, how much it means to us, the older people in the community, to have you here sharing your talents and your spirit and your teachers and your school director. Thank you so much for being here. I'd like to ask everyone to please rise as we sing Hatikva. The words are in your program, in the insert. The Brandeis kids, please, there's cookies. So of course we can't gather to sing and to pray and to be together without enjoying a little something to snack on together. So, and that's where the Brandeis kids, we invited them to go first. We also, I wanted to make mention just that in the foyer, there's a table with yahrzeit candles, memorial candles. These are special candles for Yom Hashoah, and I invite you to take one and light them when you get home this evening. And we also want to make sure that you're very careful going to your cars. The parking lot doesn't have a lot of light, and so just be very careful as you walk down the stairs and through the parking lot. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll come together again. Let's hope for something really celebratory and happy in the not too distant future. Thank you all.